Since Monday night, the news cycle has revolved almost solely around Donald Trump's proposal to stop non-American Muslims from coming to the United States. We are going to break that trend, at least momentarily, because there's a new CNN WMUR New Hampshire poll that just came in. It shows Bernie Sanders leading Hillary Clinton by 10 points. He's up at 50%, and she's at 40%. Here now to talk about that poll and probably Donald Trump, too, our Democratic strategist Steve McMahon in Washington and Republican strategist Kim Alfano in Philadelphia. Folks, welcome. Steve, I want to start with you and start on the Democratic topic. Bernie Sanders, according to this new poll, up 10 in New Hampshire. We saw a poll yesterday in Iowa that showed that Sanders, while still behind Hillary Clinton in Iowa, has picked up 10 points on her there. Is the Democratic race tightening as we get closer to the first voting?
Well, it may be tightening a little bit, but I think what it's mainly doing is returning kind of to where it was before all the Joe Biden speculation. You know, Sanders had a nice lead on Hillary Clinton in New Hampshire and has had that lead for quite some time. She had a good debate. She bumped up ahead of him, but it's kind of returning to where it was. He's always been strong there because he's from the neighboring state. He's less strong in Iowa. It'll be interesting to see how well he can do there because that's a state that requires, you know, a lot of organization, a lot of campaign activity. And we'll see how well he's set up for that. I'm not sure he is.
Kim, I know you're a Republican and not a Democrat, but if I put you in the Sanders campaign right now and said you could give them some advice about what they need to do between now and the Iowa caucuses, what would you tell them?
Well, I'd be drummed out of the political television makers community because I'd say exactly what Steve just said. Let's get your ground game going. In Iowa, it's all ground game.
All right, let's go over to the Republicans. Kim, right now, who are the three most likely nominees of your party?
Who are the three most likely?
Yeah.
Well, I just don't see Trump actually getting the nomination. I think Cruz would be the farthest most conservative guy that might have a shot. I'd say Rubio, and then I think your sleeper, to be honest, is Christie.
Yeah. All right. So that's an interesting list and one I've heard from others. Tell us the scenario by which Mr. Trump, who currently leads almost everywhere, isn't the nominee. What happens? Like play out February, March for us.
Well, I mean, listen, in Iowa, caucus goers, it's a very unique system. You've got to get people out to the caucuses. All of Trump's supporters are not traditional caucus goers. So there's the next step for him to actually drive home and win Iowa. In New Hampshire, he's not that far ahead. I mean, in New Hampshire, he's precariously holding on to his lead. So if he has a disaster in Iowa, comes in second in New Hampshire, then his bombast and all his P.T. Barnum-esque, you know, showmanship doesn't matter because then the guys that can muster that same passion should move up and take over.
Steve, I see you shaking your head as Kim says to cast doubts on Donald Trump's durability. Are you sitting over there not just hoping but actually thinking that Donald Trump is the most likely Republican nominee?
Well, I mean, you look at the poll that you guys just talked about a few minutes ago. Everybody in Washington, everybody in the Republican political establishment is saying Donald Trump is finished after these stupid, racist Muslim remarks that he made. And yet, you look at the poll, and 61% of Republican-leaning primary and caucus attenders agree with it. And 51% strongly agree. So it's the question you asked, who's going to take him out and what are the circumstances? You know, somebody recently said they were trying to explain the Trump phenomenon and they went to one of the people at his rallies and the person at the rally said, Donald Trump says things that we think but we don't say. And he's saying exactly what we think, exactly what we believe. You saw that again today. There's a huge and troubling number of Republicans who are buying this stuff that Donald Trump is selling. And frankly, if I were a Republican, I would be thinking about becoming a Democrat. And by the way, you're all welcome.
All right, Kim, now you're shaking your head. What are you shaking your head at?
Do I get your business, Steve, if I do that? I think what you're missing is his bombast, his rhetoric is fiery and it's inspiring a very disgruntled Republican Party. But you're forgetting that Iowa elected Terry Branstad. He is no firebrand. Iowa is a very calculating, a very thoughtful state. And while, yes, some of these polls are out there, there's still 30 or 40% of that vote that is not hardcore waiting for, you know, Vanderplaat's endorsement.
Right, but you're acting like the whole thing for Trump is Iowa. Can't he be the nominee even if he doesn't win Iowa?
No, I'm just saying, I think that you have to look down the line and take off the overpeel of, media coverage and polling, because I agree, I think the polling is really difficult to count on lately, since a couple of presidential races ago, actually. If you take that peel off, you got to look at the ground games of people, and you have to look at their actual turnout models.
Right.
And I don't know that Trump exists on a lower level and a really grunty political level that he needs to win.
Go ahead, Steve.
Here's the other thing you have to look at, though. You've got to look at the fact that in a multi-candidate field, and there's no indication that any of these candidates who are clogging it up are going to be going away anytime soon. In a multi-candidate field, 28, 29, 30% wins. Yeah. And starting March 15th, it doesn't just win some of the delegates, it wins all of the delegates. So the question I have for Kim and for Republicans is, who's going to stop this guy? He says the most ridiculous, inane things, and his voters applaud, and his support expands.
Let me do this as a jump ball question to go back to our poll, because I've been searching my memory, which admittedly isn't that great. It is a situation where one presidential candidate is espousing something supported by 2/3 of the people in his party. Everyone else in his party and everyone in the other party is opposed to it. Can you guys think of a parallel for that situation? Dick Cheney and Hillary Clinton say this is bad. 65% of Republicans say it's good, and Trump says it's good.
Look at their stunt.
I can't think, again. I can't think of a parallel, except perhaps Howard Dean when he was opposing the Iraq War in 2003 and 2004.
Well, but that was overwhelmingly opposed by people in his own party. That's the opposite. He was with his own party.
The people in his own party, like Donald Trump, supported his position, but the establishment within his party overwhelmingly supported the other position.
Some of the establishment.
Yeah, but listen.
And just to be clear, I'm sorry, just to be clear, because I think this is a historic moment on this poll. You're right that Dean was with the Democratic people and against some of the Democratic base, but the Republican Party was for the war. Right? Yeah. So it's close.
Right. Most Democrats were, too. Most Democrats were, too. He was running against the grain.
And he lost.
Yeah, he did.
Let me ask this question to Kim. Kim, let me ask you this question first. Are you surprised? Does it surprise you? I have a two-part question. First, does it surprise you that 2/3 of the people in your party are for this position?
It doesn't surprise me.
Does it make you proud?
Does it horrify you? Does it horrify you?
It terrifies me in a sense, but at the same time, I get why Trump is appealing, only because it's been so long since we've had a candidate that is unabashedly sticking to his own position hardcore. The problem with Trump is he has zero moral compass.
But Kim,
he'll take it from...
But Kim, he's put forward a position here that, again, all of us disagree with, but that 65% of the people in the Republican Party agree with. So apparently he has a pretty good fingertip feel for what his party wants to hear on this issue. My question for you is, if you were advising another Republican candidate right now, which you're not, who had come out and denounced him in the last couple days, and now you saw this poll, what would you tell your candidate to do?
Keep denouncing him. And I would say, look at what Ted Cruz is doing. He's no dummy. He has not necessarily denounced him hardcore, but he's saying, I agree with 90% of what he said. And if you look at conservatism, that the heart of what he's talking about is what's at the heart of what people are worrying about. So that's why it's having some resonance. If you could be the next candidate down that's like sane, take off the 20% of insanity off of what Trump said and go with the 80% that really does make sense, having stricter laws, finding a better way to vet people. Ebola, there are five countries, I think, at this point who are considered, Ebola regions. And if you come from those countries, you have to go to one of 5 airports.
Right.
I think that is not an outrageous thing. That's protecting America. I think that's where people are coming from.
But that's not based on religion.
So dial it back a little.
Yeah. All right,
it's also not what.
But I'm just saying, dial it back.
Yeah,
it's based on fear.
Let me ask you both, Steve, first on the general election. Let's assume Bernie Sanders falls short and Hillary Clinton is the nominee. Is there any dynamic currently taking place in the Republican nomination fight that should worry Hillary Clinton?
Well, I think there's a generational thing that goes on with Marco Rubio that makes him a more attractive candidate in the general election than most of the other candidates on the Republican side. And there's also, the fact that he's got a very, very compelling personal story, which makes him a much more attractive candidate. And finally, he was born to Cuban parents, which I think makes him a more interesting story. I don't think that she would lose to Marco Rubio, but I think he would run the strongest race. I think he would pose the biggest threat and the best chance for Republicans.
Kim, is your party, whoever the nominee ends up being, is your party headed towards having a strong nominee based on the dynamics of the nomination fight?
There's going to be some work to do.
That is the correct answer. It seems to me all the dynamics now are setting up. If I were in Brooklyn with Hillary Clinton, I'd be thinking, just get some popcorn, a large Diet Coke, and watch this thing play.
Well, yeah. Steve, let me ask.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Let me ask you the question, Steve, that go back to something Kim said earlier about who might be who are likely Republican nominees. She mentioned Ted Cruz. She mentioned Chris Christie. And Chris Christie's obviously getting a lot of buzz right now, right? First of all, do you think Chris Christie as a Republican nominee would be a challenge to Hillary Clinton, Steve? Difficult to beat?
I think he would be. I don't think he would be as difficult to beat as Marco Rubio, but I think he would be more challenging than Donald Trump or Ted Cruz for sure. Christie's problem is, after New Hampshire, he has to go to the evangelical states, and they all run through South Carolina. And the places where a guy like Chris Christie is not going to do very well because he's far, far too progressive a Republican for those evangelicals to support. So Christie isn't going anywhere.
And Kim, who do you think would be a stronger general election candidate, Marco Rubio or Chris Christie?
I think Christie, only because he has that. I mean, the it factor in this election is clearly bombast and self-confidence. I mean, as much as we don't want to say these are like high school elections, it seems a lot like a high school election lately, in that the issues are being sort of cast aside, the specifics are being cast aside. If you say what you believe and you say it bluntly and with the most confidence that you're absolutely right, you're moving ahead. I think Rubio doesn't have that fire.
All right. Steve McMahon and Kim Alfano, who says she would counsel her candidate to disagree with 2/3 of his party's voters on the Trump issue. Very courageous stance.
Thank you both.
Thanks for doing it, you guys. We'll be right back with some words about that obviously hinky Time Magazine choice for Person of the Year after this.